I've just disembarked a cruise where I stayed in a tiny inside cabin designed for just one person. Coming in at 6'6" wide, these cabins are located right in the middle of the ship in an area that most guests don't have access to. I've spent the last 9 nights in one and it was such an eye-opening experience. I did things that I've never done on a cruise before. I have stayed in inside cabins loads of times in the past, but only ones which are considerably bigger and never by myself. When I saw that the cruise that I was taking on board Norwegian Breakaway had studio solo cabins on board, I wondered if it might be worth me giving it a go. I was cautious because I wasn't cruising solo on this cruise, so it wouldn't be the most obvious choice, but curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to try out the cabin and the other parts that went along with it. I hoped that it would feel futuristic and cozy, maybe like a little spaceship cabin. I wasn't sure though if it would feel claustrophobic given that it was so small. I couldn't imagine how there could be enough storage in a room of this size, and I didn't know if I would be okay with having a shower that was in the main room. 9 nights is a long time to have regrets, so I hope that I would enjoy it. I hope too that I wouldn't miss having a balcony or a window because this cabin had no access to the outside. I was assigned cabin 11547 and I went straight to Norwegian's website to have a look at where it was. All of the studio solo cabins are on deck 10 and deck 11, so I had a rough idea where I'd be. These studio cabins are located down a corridor which only the studio cabin guests have access to, and when I boarded the ship I was able to use my cruise card to open this secret door. I loved all of the colours in the corridors and I saw a sign that said Studio Lounge. I decided to come back and check out that part later. I didn't have to walk very far down to find my room, and walking into the cabin was so exciting. I've known about this type of cabin since 2010 and I've wanted to try it ever since. On one side there was a big bed and I loved the colours of the room. Given that there was no windows, I knew that the lighting would be very important, especially with these walls. You wouldn't want a harsh bright light here, but I'm very happy to say it was beautifully designed. I say no windows, there is a window above the bed and it looks out into the corridor. At this point I wasn't sure why I would want to look out into the corridor, but as the cruise went on it did make more sense. On the other side of the cabin was a toilet in a little room and a shower that opened directly into the cabin itself. Normally I would think it was a bit strange to have a shower that opened directly into the cabin, but it would only be me staying there after all, and to have a fully separate bathroom would take up a lot more floor space. On the furthest wall was a small sink and there was my storage space. Luckily for me, I did not have to wait very long to find out how much storage there was. My suitcase arrived at my door and I was able to unpack. On a cruise, you leave your bag in the terminal with a luggage tag on it and they bring it to your room for you. On a ship like this one with 4,000 guests, there's probably 5,000 or 6,000 suitcases, which is mind-blowing to think about. There were 2 wardrobe hanging areas, one with a safe on the bottom and another with a couple of shelves. I managed to unpack all of my clothes without any problem, but I knew that I would have to keep this space tidy or it could get messy very fast. If I left my shoes on the floor, for example, I would definitely be tripping over those. I usually just put my shoes under this desk area. Next to the sink there were some little cubicles and this is where I'd put most of my stuff that I needed throughout the day, like my chargers. This just kind of became the bits and bobs area. There were loads of plug sockets in this cabin, which I was not expecting given the size of the room. I had 3 US sockets here and another US and European socket closer to the bed. These weren't right next to the bed, but the cabin was so tiny that nothing was ever too far away. I would charge my phone here and everything else on the other side. The bed itself was pretty big and it certainly didn't feel as though I was missing out on anything bed-wise. I still had 2 pillows, I had plenty of room, and one massive benefit of a solo cabin like this instead of staying in a regular cabin is that this is just one big mattress. In a standard cabin, it'll be 2 twin beds pushed together. After unpacking and pushing my suitcase under the bed, I headed down the corridor to check out the solo lounge. No other cruise line has anything like this, and I have a lot of friends who love solo cruising with Norwegian because of this. This space is split over 2 levels and there are plenty of seats where you can sit if you do want to make friends and you want to chat with other solos. It's also a pretty good place if you want to work too. You can just bring your laptop here and you'll have more space than you do in your cabin. The fact that everybody who is in here is cruising solo is great because it means that you're all in the same situation. That said though, not everyone who stays here really is solo in the truest sense of the word. Sometimes it's just the case that they are traveling with an odd number of people in their group, and the regular cabins don't really make sense for that. I have been on cruises before where I have been the third person in the cabin and I've been on the sofa bed. It's totally fine, but this is much better. Often on cruises, it'll cost you more if you do want to cruise alone and stay in a cabin as a solo cruiser instead of sharing the room and splitting the cost. You're basically paying for that missing person. That is one of the reasons why I think cabins like this are such a great idea. There is no solo supplement to stay here. The price is just the price. That's all great in theory, of course, and I hope that actually staying in the cabin would live up to the idea that I've built up in my head over all of these years. Norwegian first launched these solo cabins on a ship called Norwegian Epic, and I sailed on her in 2015. Back then I had the standard inside cabin and I shared it with my brother. We had a great time. I couldn't have gone down this secret corridor back then though, because I was not cruising solo. On the bottom level of the studio lounge, there was a bar and a section with a coffee machine and cake. I don't drink coffee, so I'm afraid I can't really comment too much on that part, but I did meet a lot of people on board who would start their day every day with a coffee from here, and I'm told that it's good. The lounge felt bright and spacious, and in total 57 cabins on board have access to this space. Heading back to my room, I decided to order some cans of water. This is something that I would have never considered doing a year or so ago, but I did it once and now I do it every single time I cruise with Norwegian. I ordered 24 and thought that that would be good for 9 nights. I wasn't sure where I was going to put them, but I figured I'd sort that out later. All of the paperwork just went above the bed, which was good. It was out the way, but it was accessible, and there's night lights here too. At this point, I needed to go to the toilet and I was weirdly excited to try out the tiny room. You could of course keep the door open if you wanted, since it's only you in the room anyway, but I thought that there was plenty of space and there was everything that you needed in there. If you are a lot taller than me or wider than me, it might be more squishy, but overall I didn't have any problems with it. My friend Tony, who describes himself as a fluffy cruiser, also said that it was perfectly good for him too. I was just as excited to try out the shower, and I know that that might sound strange, but everything is exciting on a cruise. The shower itself was a good size, but I did scare myself half to death when I was having a shower on the first day. I had the light on actually in the shower and not in the rest of the room, so when I turned round and I caught a glimpse of my own reflection, my own face staring back at me, for 0.01 second, I was pretty convinced that was someone else, and it scared me so much. I never scared myself like that again, but the first time it really made me jump. I had a couple of towels on the side and one for the floor too. I was worried that the water might go everywhere and make a mess, but it didn't at all. Over in this area there's a hard floor and it separated nicely the bathroom area from the bedroom area. On the door at the far end there was plenty of hooks, and it's small things like this that really do make a big difference when the cabin is tiny. They really made the most out of every single inch. Looking at this door, you might be wondering where it goes. It looks as though it goes right through to next door, and you would be right if you did assume that. This cabin is an interconnecting cabin, meaning that you can have these doors unlocked if you're cruising with the person that's staying there. I think that that's a great idea if you're friends or family, but you still want your own space. You both get your own big bed, you get your own toilet and your own shower, and if you have a friend that is really messy, they can keep all of their mess in their cabin, and you can keep your cabin however you like it. You can also control your own temperature too, as the thermostat is in here. It was a warm weather summer cruise when I took this trip, and the air conditioning was great. It got the room really cold and snuggly. My cabin steward must have been very strong, because it took all of my strength every night to untuck the quilt or the duvet. I drew this diagram for a friend when I was on board, and I think that this shows what I mean. I just can't sleep without it tucked under my feet. I don't know why. Every room on board is cleaned every day, and it was spotlessly clean. I do feel like I saw every centimetre of this cabin because I was in it for 9 nights. I set up my daylight alarm clock so that I wouldn't wake up in the dark, and I went to bed. It was very quiet down this part of the corridor, and because there really aren't very many cabins here, it was rare that people walked past. I could hear people having conversations in the corridor very occasionally, but it generally felt like a very quiet part of the ship. At one point I did do a live stream in this room, and it is weird how I can have hundreds of people watching me live on the chat and it doesn't make me self-conscious, but the thought about one person in the real world loud hearing me, that really does. I don't think I annoyed anybody, I hope not anyway, but my cabin mates, everyone who I met was great. I opened the shutter on the window to the corridor a little bit and it was this beautiful purple colour which was so relaxing. These windows are one way so no one can see in at all, but you can see out. It's kind of blurry, but you can see the odd shape wandering by. It definitely did help to make the room feel less claustrophobic, although I never felt that it was anyway. To me, it felt snuggly, and that is the word that I'm using. I'm sure I've used that word about 5 times in this video already. As the cruise went on, I got so much better with the storage, and I found extra places to put things up high and down low. I was a bit nervous about where I was going to put my vast amount of water when it arrived, but I found out that there was more storage space in the stool by the bed, so that was sorted. Sorted has got to be your Britishism of the week, and it just means to have something fixed or to have something taken care of. Our trains here, they do a safety announcement and it says, see it, say it, sorted, meaning if you see something strange, tell someone and they will fix it. I had to get it sorted once upon a time when someone took my do not disturb sign from outside my cabin during the night. Luckily for me though, that would never happen on this cruise because they have the makeup room and do not disturb buttons actually within the cabin itself. These buttons light up lights that are outside in the corridor. We also had a good hairdryer in the cabin and the power was controlled by putting my cruise card into this slot by the door. There wasn't a fridge in this cabin, but honestly I was quite glad about that. I would much prefer just to have an extra drawer or a cupboard for my clothes, and I can't see where one would really fit. I rearranged the whole place when I did my live stream. I moved the table over near the shower and I sat on the stool that now had the water in it. I wish I had known about the stool from day one, and another tip that I would give anybody staying in this room is that if you can, do some laundry. I get a free bag with my loyalty status with Norwegian and it is my favourite thing ever. You just put your dirty clothes into the bag and they magically reappear clean and folded. It's amazing. I wish it worked like that at home. I still have some of the tags in my clothes and I could take them out, but it reminds me of my cruise. Because I wasn't really cruising solo on this trip, I was able to spend a good amount of time in a standard inside cabin too. That really helped me to compare. It was just as nice a room as this one and the bathroom was absolutely massive. Maybe it wasn't massive, but it did feel it compared to mine anyway. This is the same type of cabin I stayed in when I cruised on this ship way back in 2014, and here are a few pictures from that very early cruise. This was long before I had any idea that I would ever be talking to you on the internet about cruises. One of the biggest benefits of my solo cabin over this standard inside cabin, in my opinion, was the location. Not just because of the solo lounge, but also because it was closer to the middle and not too far from the top decks. I never felt any movement in here at all, and we were so lucky with the weather on this cruise. I'd have been quite happy to stay in the inside cabin too, and I have in the past, but having my own quiet corridor and tiny cabin was such a treat. I'm used to sharing inside cabins like this with another person, so I probably had more space to myself anyway by having this smaller room, but just for me. To find out what it's really like staying in an inside cabin and sharing that space with another person, watch this video next. Once you've watched this, you'll be able to decide, would you like this smaller studio or would the standard inside cabin be fine? I'll see you there in a couple of seconds. 3, 2, 1.